Hello and welcome to Season 3 of Hames Hot Mic. I'm Clint Hames, the host, and this season we're going to be expanding our discussions with people in the region who are involved in making positive changes to this valley we call home. I'll be back with one such person, Chief Dave Jimmie from Squiala First Nation, after this quick break. Chief Jimmie is Chief and CEO of the Squiala First Nation, President of the Stalo Nation Chiefs Council, and President of the Chilliwack Tribe. Dave has also served as a director on the local Chilliwack Chamber of Commerce and currently sits on our local hospital foundation as well. He's also served on the New Relationship Trust, which is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to strengthening First Nations in British Columbia through capacity building. I'm particularly excited to have Dave as a guest today on the show. Dave, you hold so many positions within the Indigenous community in Chilliwack and, in fact, in the community. I'd like you to first talk about some of the structure of First Nations governance and the roles that you're playing in those. I think most people would understand a governance structure at a band level, but there's so many other levels and layers to Indigenous governance in British Columbia, and I know that you're serving in a number of different capacities. Can you help us understand what some of those things are?
Sure. First of all, thanks, Clint, for the invitation. Happy to be here today. It's, people that come through Stalo territory, whether it's a government or thinking about a proponent, like you've got all these different initiatives that come through the territory. Stalo has to be one of the most complicated territories in the province and also potentially across the country, just because we have so many small bands in such a small area. Treaties were originally started back east, and so they slowly made their way across the country and getting to BC. BC being the last province in the country, still negotiating treaties, but that's why you see these larger groupings and territories represented through different treaties across the country. So here, like if I were to start at, here at Squiala, what our governance structure looks like, you've got an Indian Act band, you think of Sawali, you think of Acton, you think of Atchlets, Quickweaves, these are all Indian Act bands. So the sort of, let's just say we're starting at this, if we're going to develop a bit of a structure, along the bottom here, we've got the Indian Act bands. They form, for example, the Chilliwack Tribe. So from there, we have 7 communities that are part of the Chilliwack Tribe. You've got neighboring communities that are part of the Balt Tribe, and then also the Tate Tribe. So then you have different tribal affiliations for tribal council funding and different initiatives. That's where you start to see Stalo Nation come up, and then you hear about Stalo Tribal Council as well. But from a governance perspective at the band level, we're responsible for our own lands, we're responsible for health in the community, we're responsible for education, social assistance. It depends on how much capacity the community has. So if you've built up enough in-house staffing and have the expertise to do it, you can start drawing down those departments and being able to service your community members better, as long as you have the people in-house to start doing that. So years ago, Stalo Nation used to provide services for all the member communities, and they would deal with all of those elements of education and land management and all of those sorts of things. But as communities started to grow and build capacity at home, they started to draw back those resources and start doing that work themselves. So that's sort of a band level, and that's just high level. I can go into a ton of detail, which I won't. But that's sort of just, thinking about some of the things that we're working on. You're responsible for your reserve, then what's in the reserve boundary, and then being able to provide back to your membership and strengthening all of those different things.
So that would, an example of a First Nation community that is very significantly advanced in that regard would be Seabird or Chehalis, where they have developed a range of different services that are managed. And as you say, we have a number of very small bands within the boundaries of the city of Chilliwack that wouldn't have that capacity. So Stalo Nation was created as a way to provide services and supports to those First Nations who wouldn't have the capacity to do that for themselves. So that's, and so in your position as the president of the Chiefs Council, Stalo Nation, what does that involve?
So Stalo Nation Chiefs Council is primarily a political advocacy body. So we're working to support our communities when large initiatives come out throughout the province, or you hear different shifts in legislation. We think about health services that are provided, and you look at the First Nations Health Authority that was, taken back from the province essentially under jurisdiction from First Nations as opposed to the province handling health. You have a large, you don't want to just take on what's been happening for years, because that was the whole point. So the Stalo Nation Chiefs Council, you have our leadership come together. We discuss issues around how we can improve health services through the First Nations Health Authority. You look at sometimes different issues around fishing will come up, education. We still see some inequities around education with respect to on-reserve schools and education. And so it depends really on what is a focus at a particular time. We also look at some of the larger initiatives done by the 3 provincial territorial organizations. So the BC Assembly of First Nations, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and also the First Nations Summit. So those 3 organizations, you have leadership from across the province that participate in each. Each have a bit of a different mandate. So we'll discuss sometimes if there's a leadership candidate coming up and they want to come and talk to the chiefs and discuss their platform, we'll make space for them. We also look at children and family services and some of the challenges we have with delegated agencies and others that are providing services into the community. So it's a pretty wide array of different topics that come through the table, and it just depends on what really is at hand and what people bring forward.
It really sounds like a kind of an advocacy portal into other levels of government and other governance structures there. How many members sit on that Chiefs Council?
9 communities on the Stalo Nation Chiefs Council.
9 communities. So you talked a little bit about the First Nations Health Authority, and you alluded to social services. There's also a corresponding agency that serves this region, serves social services in this region. That's another delegated authority that has been drawn down to the band level, correct?
Yep, that's right. You have, like normally through the provincial service model, you've got MCFD, and we have the delegated agencies throughout the province, like chillTV right here locally, which work to really think about how to enhance and deliver services conducive to what families are used to, and how we can keep culture alive with families, and how we can keep children home in their own communities as well.
Yeah, as we talked just briefly before, I think I'd be correct in saying that there were a number of European-influenced institutions which did not seem to understand or reflect the values or culture of First Nations within British Columbia, and in fact, probably Canada. And so these health authorities and social service agencies like Yathmeeth are, in fact, being designed in a way that does understand the values and culture. And is your assessment that that's showing success now, that it's had a chance to kind of get its feet under it and moving forward?
Definitely. I think with any type of service delivery model, around children and family services, you're going to have challenges. Reality is you've got families that are just struggling in different ways, and you're never going to come up with the ultimate solution that's going to provide something that works for everybody. The reality is, family challenges are something that we don't have a wand to fix, and it's just being able to provide the services and think about how we can provide prevention methods and think ahead instead of being reactive all the time, and understanding where are from in the communities that they're working in. So it's definitely moving forward, and I've never said that anything's perfect because we all know what that's like. But it's something that you've got an opportunity to have input from members of the community that are very familiar and passionate about children and families and can be able to contribute in a way that hasn't been done or maybe isn't done necessarily in the same model through MCFD.
So I want to shift gears just a little bit. In the past 10 or 15 years, there's been what I think is unprecedented growth in residential and commercial development on band lands in Chilliwack. I think it started probably in the late 1990s on Chiatkin when the 7 acres on the corridor of Veta Road and Promontory Road was developed into a shopping center, and also some band development, a community hall, those offices, those sorts of things. And now it's moved its way onto Squiala, where you have one of the, I think, maybe the largest and nicest commercial centers anywhere around at Eagle Landing. How does that benefit the communities that are putting these lands together? Because they're not necessarily Indigenous developments. They're not Aboriginal developments. These are lands that are leased, and then there's a benefit that flows back. How is that going? Are you happy with what's been happening there?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about reserve lands and where they're situated in proximity to within the municipality, or where the cities were, thinking about 50 years or 100 or 1867, the reserve lands were sort of pushed to the outskirts, right? And so now we've seen the exponential growth in Chilliwack, Abbotsford, all of these communities, and the growth ends up coming right up to the borders of the reserve, and then starts to continue to grow around the reserve, which unlocks this amazing opportunity for economic development. And that's what we're seeing, and seeing how the growth happens. You've got a lot of people that have been involved in learning sort of the industry and understanding, especially around commercial retail or residential building. It's a learning experience that I've gone through personally, and knowing what I know now would have structured things a little bit differently for us here at Eagle Landing. But the benefits are fantastic back to community. In our particular instance, we're the majority shareholder of Eagle Landing because we own 50%. We have 2 partners, which are 25% and 25%. So we generate revenue through all of our leases, the commercial retail business. Then we also generate revenue through our taxation. So we're able to collect taxes, and we have an agreement with the city where we provide taxes back to the city, and we are able to keep a portion of those as well based on the services. When you think about what's needed in communities, and a lot of people kind of forget how much is actually done in smaller communities or at a reserve level, and for a community such as ours, where we're only 200 people, what we're able to give back is thinking about how would benefit community members. So we have a lot of parents that need some support financially when they have new children, so new babies. So it's new children, that sounds funny, sorry. With new babies, we're able to give back a little bit just to help out with diaper food on a monthly basis until the baby is 2 years old. So programs like that, we provide support back to elders. We know they like to travel. We try to provide some support in that way. Health is a big concern. So anything over and above with respect to health that isn't covered, the band steps up and provides that extra. Kids in the community, any kid that wants to play sports, we pay for the registration, we pay for their equipment. Education, we receive some funding from the federal government on post-secondary education, but it doesn't include tech and trades. And we have a lot of hands-on people in the community. So we develop programs like that, just all of those to provide, give back to community in the form of support, and not necessarily the dependent model. So, every community is different. The needs are different. You hear from everybody, and you start developing it back in a way that you can, that's going to support everybody.
The other thing that I've noticed specifically in Squiala is the facilities that you've been able to develop there, the community hall, the school, those sorts of things. Those have got to be something that folks there just look at with a significant amount of pride. It's a way for them to really understand the investment they've made by developing the reserve is paid. It appears to have paid huge dividends for them.
Well, I mean, as a kid, I grew up. We didn't have paved roads in the community. My dad was one of the first to pave our driveway, so all the kids in the neighborhood came over and we played road hockey outside. We set the lights up and we would stay there all night. We would play basketball out there, and now you've got a facility that the kids can come and access and go and play. The Longhouse, that was a significant, we think about what keeps communities there, and you think about a critical element being culture, because it was stripped away for so long, being a man with the potlatch and that. One of the first things we did in generating some of that own source revenue was building our Longhouse and then building our community center, which became, our central office location, as well as the fitness. We ran our school out of here for the first little while until we built the new school. So yeah, all of those, building a new canoe shed again. Our old location was falling apart. We had canoes that, our uncles and my dad had built. So now we've got them safely stored, and hoping to bring those back out on the water again and refurbish them. So yeah, lots of, exciting initiatives that you're able to generate that kind of revenue.
And it's all about building strength and resilience in the community, and you seem to be just doing an amazing job with that. Dave, I'm just going to take a quick break. We have to acknowledge our sponsors in shows like this, so we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with my guest, Chief Dave Jimmie. Welcome back, everyone, to Hames Hot Mic. My guest today is Chief Dave Jimmie. We've been talking about growth and development in his community, but certainly about issues that are relative to First Nations community in the Chilliwack area and, in fact, the Fraser Valley. Dave, in our world, we're talking about development on a number of the reserve lands, and it seems like First Nations have put more emphasis in, especially our community and perhaps others, in the development of drawing down powers like a land code, as opposed to the treaty process. We don't hear much about the treaty process, especially locally. I'm just wondering, is there more emphasis now on the empowerment of local First Nations through things like their development of the land code, as opposed to looking to a treaty process? Where is that in your perspective?
Yeah, I think you think back 20 years ago when you had a number of Stalo communities come together to look at the BC treaty process, and so everybody's kind of started looking at it as one, and then everybody, all of the different communities had different initiatives and what they were thinking and where the direction was going. So but it didn't fit for some. And so you started to see those numbers sort of become smaller and smaller. And Squiala was one of those. Our community had withdrawn from the treaty process. And you always had these sort of larger organizations advancing jurisdiction with respect to reserve lands. And land code was one of those. So prior to having land code, you're handcuffed by going through the federal process. So you can't work at the speed of business. And so that was something that was very significant for a lot of the communities. Instead of, in our case with Eagle Landing or any other commercial development opportunity, your lease approval process is going to be anywhere from weeks to months before you get it back. Once you take over that jurisdiction, it comes with a number of factors, and you remove actually a number of items from the Indian Act in taking over that jurisdiction. So now you can move at the speed of business. We can register a lease within a matter of days as opposed to months or weeks. And now we're alive and competitive with our neighbors, and it helps the development industries move so much faster, and people are then more interested. You've got I think you've got developers that went through the old process and worked through that. We've got some of the larger developers here in Chilliwack that have been doing business on First Nations land for a very long time. Van Maren group of companies, Eric and Bernie, foresight to look at that, doing some work with Chiacton, some work up in West Bank, and developing models that work. And then you see a lot more developers doing that the last 10 years. But just that ability in drawing down jurisdiction. So treaty is going to work for some, and it's going to give you some, these land and cash offerings in dealing with the province and the federal government. But in the meantime, if you're not in that process, how do you keep building out and gaining that jurisdiction? So land code is one. Another one is developing your own financial administration law, which has been recognized by the federal government. So that provides further, you think about having transparency in the community and making sure everybody is aware of what's happening. That's another avenue to go down, taxation. So all of those elements of jurisdiction have been negotiated at the highest level with Canada, and then being able to bring that back to the community and develop your own process starts to give you that autonomy and jurisdiction that we've been looking for. So treaty is going to, serve a purpose around expanding on that jurisdiction. But in the meantime, if you're not in that process, all of those other agreements definitely help to support building out the growth of the community.
And certainly you would recognize, being in the development and economic development game, the time is of the essence. You can't sit around and wait. And you had mentioned, it'll take weeks or months to get a lease approved. The experience that I recall was it was months or years in some cases to get something through that bureaucracy that exists in Ottawa. And you couldn't possibly compete in economic development if you took years to get something done that a local government or another level of government could take days to do. So it made it almost impossible for those things to happen. I'm going to shift gears again. I think the information that you're sharing today has just been great, and I want to shift gears to something that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure it is to yours as well. One of the things that we're discovering is that Indigenous folks are overrepresented in some areas that are not good areas to be overrepresented in. Our homeless population in Chilliwack has a high percentage of Indigenous folks. There are other institutions that seem to have that as well. And one of the things that I've been working on a committee with the mayor is trying to figure out how we can take some of the money that is earmarked through Health Canada and others that are going to help with some of those issues to folks that don't identify with a particular reserve in this community. So we have folks that come from other communities. The money that's there to support them exists in a different community than our community. You receive funding, or Stalo Nation or Health Services receives funding to support people who live here on reserve. Are there programs or an understanding of how we're going to move forward to try to get funding that's going to support urban Aboriginal folks that are challenged with homelessness or addictions?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question and a great point, actually, thinking about we run into that challenge here in our own reserves, and that is receiving funding that is only earmarked for those that are living on reserve. But every one of our members that is not living on reserve, that may be in the city of Chilliwack or maybe in Agassiz or in Vancouver, they've always known to call the office for support. We've always said that we're here to help, we're here to provide any support we can. But there's a big problem with the way that those old programs have been developed, and health is a primary example. Even though we have our own health authority and have made that transfer over the years, we still face those same challenges. We're still having our own structure that we've adopted and are trying to make changes to, following that old system of, you can only have so many funds allocated to your community members, and then the others off reserve. Even though you're servicing them, we're not going to fund you for it. So we have to start thinking about what that shift looks like, and we need to start making some changes, advocating ourselves for that. The homeless population oh, I don't even know where to start with it because it does hit home for me. Just family members and struggling and the level of addiction that comes with that and trying to find the proper supports. And then even our own systems for service. You've got to be clean for so long and through detox in order to qualify to go and get help. And sometimes in these instances, you've got a small window of opportunity where someone's willing to go and seek that support. But unless you can get them into a detox center, which is, already overcrowded, and then there's going to be a wait list. So like there's so many things we have to think about and work towards and trying to provide that opportunity for. And, it's another one that it's got to be the most complex and challenging situation that we all face and try because we all want to, help and do what we can, but we also want the help to be received and people to want the help. And there's a very difficult challenge in working through all of that.
I think you've hit on one of the real challenges is that when somebody comes to a decision, and often that's what it takes is an individual coming to a decision that says, okay, I want the help, that if you're not there right then and right there with that help, that dissipates and the person falls back into the challenging lifestyle that they've had. And so we have to figure out a way to make sure that those doors are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that when people need the help, they know they can get that help immediately. It's one of the things I think that in the work I've been doing with the Mayor's Committee on Public Safety that we're hearing over and over and over again is being able to marry up that time when a person wants the help with it being available, instead of saying, oh, well, come and see me Monday morning at 9 o'clock when the office opens. If it's 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, that that's not going to help or happen. So hopefully we can begin to work on those things in the community, and certainly with leadership from someone like yourself who's also working on the hospital foundation as well for our community. That's pretty exciting. Is there other things that you're working on? What's new and exciting that we might not have heard yet for Dave, Jimmie, and Squiala and Stalo? Is there any news you can share with us?
Oh, I think there's so many different initiatives going on, and I think the wonderful part of being in the position I am in is the exposure to different experiences and businesses. So, within Chilkowiak, we operate our forestry licenses there.
Yeah.
We have, we deal with looking at run-of-the-river hydroelectric projects. We look at proponents that come through the territory that are going to have an impact. And so working with, Scott Sackle, the renaming of Chilliwack Lake, which was super exciting. We've got, a Halkomelum name up there for Scott Sackle, which has been great. I've also been working with the RCMP, the Cultus Lake Parks Board, Transport Canada, and a number of others to think about the safety of Cultus Lake and how we can look at different options there. So working on a working group there with a committee, which has been great. We've got some options coming for the summer, which we're excited to start working on. There are a number of different tables. I think different communities are doing different things. I think about Matsqui just down the road. What they've done in acquiring the old MSA lands for the hospital, and what they're going to do with that. I'm excited to watch and just all the different work. It's a proud moment in time, I think, to see progress, and it doesn't come without its hindrances and some challenges. But we're at a place now where we're seeing capacity built in communities. We're seeing our post-secondary education graduates increasing, every year. We're looking at our workforce increasing. So I think just all around, it's a time to celebrate some of the accomplishments that have been happening and led a lot here in BC. I think that's something people don't realize. When we go to Ottawa, because we have larger national chiefs meetings, we go there and talk about some of the initiatives taking place, in the Fraser Valley throughout BC. they're not quite there in some cases. So it's a wonderful, like I said, time to be working on all these different things and learning. Like I feel like I'm a constant learner, and having to deal with the provincial government on different issues, to the federal government on different issues, and learning to negotiate through long processes.
Yeah.
It tests your patience. Yeah,
Well,
just a good time all around.
Dave, you're obviously a good learner, but let me also point out that you're a good teacher as well. I've learned a significant amount today, and I hope folks that watch the show have learned a lot. I think one of the things that comes to mind when I think about what we've talked about today is that these things happen when we have strong, committed, and visionary leaders in communities. And I think your community needs to be very proud of the strength and vision that you've provided, not just to Squiala, but to all of the Stalo people in moving things forward in building capacity. I'm delighted to have had you today, and I suspect I'm going to want to have you back again and chat about some more things, because it's been the quickest half hour I can remember on this show. So thanks so much. My guest today was Chief Dave Jimmie. It was just a pleasure exploring the themes that we explored, and I hope that in doing so, we brought a higher level of knowledge and understanding to our audience, which is always my goal. On behalf of us at chillTV, I want to thank you very much for watching, and see you next time on Hames Hot Mic